I'm a big fan of superhero comics and anything that has to do with superheroes, video games, movies, games. So I was very excited when I heard that there was a game coming out called Robin. I thought, yes, finally, a game that gives visibility to such an interesting character that really does not deserve just to be seen as Batman's sidekick. Robin deserves his own game. So I was very excited. Robin, and well, they kind of changed the costume a little bit. I think it's like a redesign. Also, I was surprised to see that he had the bow and arrow, but maybe it's a crossover with the Huntress. Okay, let's be serious now. Robin is not about DC Comics, of course. It is about Robin Hood. Or better, Robin Hood is not really there. It's about the merry companions of Robin. The players are members of Robin Hood's team, and they go around the forest and in the vicinity of the castle trying to gather resources. They share resources, they grab resources, so like there's a common fund that they all interact with. Yes, they're all friends, they're all working together, but let's face it, at the end, these merry companions also are a little bit of show-offs because they're trying to impress Robin. Each player is trying to win the game by impressing Robin and being the best gatherer of one type of resource. It is a card game, a card board game. Cards really are at the core, but there's a small board and the position of the pieces on the board does matter. It is pretty important in the game. Let me show you how Robin plays, but before I do that, I want to thank the publisher that sent me an advanced copy. The game will be released in Essen in, well, the next couple of weeks. But I was able to play the game already, and I'm going to tell a little bit about my experience with Robin. The game is played on this little mounted board here. There is a track where the players will move their characters, represented by meeples. Here you see the setup of the game. The initial placement of the meeples depends on the number of players. At the beginning of the game you also take these tiles, you shuffle them and you place them randomly, one per each space that has a clear box on top, so that the placement of these resources will change from game to game. Here is the castle, an area where the good stuff to steal is. The closer you are to the castle, the more resources you can grab, but it's also dangerous. And yeah, you have the forest, where you do not have many resources, but it's pretty safe. You also have a deck of cards. These cards, the art looks nice enough. Component-wise, they're coated with some sort of plasticky thing, that's a technical term, which makes them very durable. I don't think you need to sleeve them. At the same time, they are a little slippery. Sometimes I grab the deck and I just project the cards like this. So I have to be careful with that, which is one of the reasons why I don't sleeve cards, because they become too slippery for my taste. These cards, at the beginning of the game, you draw 10 and you place them in a stack face up, and that's called the contribution stack. You give 4 cards to each player as their initial starting hand, and then the rest of the cards form the draw deck, the draw pile, which technically in game terms is called the mission deck. Now, at the beginning of your turn, you will interact with the space in which you are. If there is a number on top of the space where you are, that indicates the number of mission cards that you draw and you get to add to your hand. So the closer you are to the castle, the more cards you're allowed to draw. However, we're all together, we're working together as a band. That means that you also contribute part of the resources that we find to the contribution deck. So after you drew your cards, you may have to place cards from your hand to the contribution pile. That means, for example, that if you're in this space, you draw 4 and then you discard 2. You discard them into this pile. So at the end you did get only 2, but you could choose the ones that you wanted out of 4. And you can place cards in the pile by choosing them from the ones that you just got, the one that you had in your hand. Completely up to you as long as you pay that penalty. It may be that you only get to draw and you do not have to pay. It may also be that you do not get to draw from the mission pile, 0 cards from the mission pile, but you get to draw from the contribution pile. you're here, you're in the forest with your merry fellows, and you're using the resources that have been gathered by the group. Usually that means that if you are in this area here, you can get more resources. Here you can get 5 cards, discard 2, that means you got 3 new ones. You get more resources, but here if you're in this area, you get from this pile, so you only get 1 card, but you get to choose the one that you're getting. So there's an advantage. Sometimes you will want to go there because there's a card that you really need that is here. So at the beginning and end of your turn, you check the top of the area where you are, you check the bottom, draw cards, return cards to the decks, and that phase is over. Then is your turn and you need to play a card. There are 2 types of cards. One is a special effect card, and you play, and it is this type of card. They all have the same art, they just have different icons to identify the effect, and in the manual there is a section that tells you what those icons are. Some are pretty intuitive, some not so much. If you play one such card, you play it face up, you resolve the effect, and your turn is over, so you do not need to do anything else. The other cards have symbols on them, symbols that match the resources that the friends of Robin Hood are trying to gather. So for example, you can have weapons, this is like, I don't know, wood for fire, food, animals, stuff like that. So this is the resource that the card generates or represents, and then you have these arrows, and I'll explain later what these are for, but these are very important arrows. During your turn, if you have not played one such card, you have, it is mandatory, to play a card in front of you, and you are offering it. You're offering it to the other players. If they don't want it, you get to use it, but maybe they will want it. So you're offering a card to the other players, and they can choose to accept it or not. If nobody makes an offer for that card, then you get to resolve that card, and I'll explain later how you do that. It may be that the players decide to make an offer for an exchange. If a player wants to exchange the card that you just offered with theirs, then they place the card that they want to give you face down in front of them. There may be multiple players making offers, in which case then the players reveal the offered card at the same time, and the active player can choose which exchange to accept. The active player has to accept an exchange if an offer is made. That means if you have multiple offers, you choose the one you want, and then suppose I choose this one, you physically trade cards. If there is only one offer, then you have to accept. So if somebody is making an offer, you know that you will not be able to resolve the card that you just played on the table. Once the exchange is made, or in case no exchanges are made, you resolve the effect of the card, which means you resolve the arrows. If no exchange happened, you are the only player with a card on the table, then you resolve your arrows. If there was an exchange that was made, the non-active player gets to resolve the arrows of the received card first, and then you, the active player, get to resolve the arrows on the card that you received second. So that's an interesting thing. The non-active player, if he performs an exchange with the active player, manages to do something before the active player. What do the arrows mean? The arrows indicate characters that move. The arrows must be seen as in groups of arrows. For example, this is 3 arrows, but they form 2 groups. These are 2 arrows, 2 groups, 3 arrows, 3 groups. So if arrows form a group, they are sort of like one a little bit on top of the other. These arrows are used to move characters. A white arrow moves a meeple by 1 space to the right. A black arrow moves a meeple by 1 space to the left. And a group of 2 arrows moves a meeple by 2 arrows. And you have to resolve as many arrows as you can. Suppose that this is my card I'm playing here. I can choose I have to move 2 meeples to the right. And you can move your own meeple, or you can move other players' meeples. Players interact with one another in a lot of ways here. So here I have to move 2 meeples, so it doesn't matter which one I am. I could move this guy and this guy, or it could have been this guy. Each group of arrows has to be applied to a different card. Once a card is resolved, the other arrow card is resolved. If there was an exchange, that means 2 movement cards will need to be resolved. And suppose that this is the card that they need to resolve next, then only 2 meeples will move, 1 per group, and 1 meeple will move to the left by 1, and 1 meeple will move to the right by 2. Again, you can move your own meeple or other players' meeples any way you want. If you're on this space, you cannot go to the left. So there may be cases in which the arrows, so you will have to use the arrows in a certain way because you need to try to resolve as many arrows as possible. But if you are on the rightmost space of the track and somebody moves your right, then that means that you have been spotted around the castle, you're scared, you need to run back to the forest. So when you move to the right here, you teleport back here, which can be bad because here you really don't get many resources. You get a card from the contribution stack and you're stuck with it. You don't have any choice. So it can be bad and it can be a while before you go back in the profitable areas. On the other hand, again, it may be that you want to go back to the contribution stack because you want to get precisely that card, in which case you linger around here, you're just like hanging out, making it look like you don't really care too much about what happens, or you were distracted, oh gee, somebody pushed me, now I'm stuck here. Of course, you could just move all the way here and then there, but then people know that you wanted that card and that tells them something about what you're trying to do. Which, incidentally, I haven't explained yet. What is it that you're trying to do? You're trying to collect 7 resource cards with the same icon. So it could be 7 animals, 7 swords, any 7 money, any 7 that have the same icon, you win the game. If you have a hand of 7, you can reveal it at the end of your turn, after all the movement has been resolved, and at that point you are declared the winner of the game. You may also win the game if at the end of your turn you have 6 cards of a certain type. Suppose I have 6 swords and I am in the area corresponding to that resource. So that resource can count as an extra card of the corresponding type at the end of the game when you're declaring victory. So you win with 7 cards in hand or 6 plus being in the right spot when you are showing the 6 to the group. Robin was an unexpected pleasure. I have to say unexpected. I was excited, it looks good, the components are so good. After reading the rules, the game seemed incredibly abstract and contrived, and I was afraid that it was going to be too random. People wouldn't be in control of anything because people are moving your piece all the time. During your turn, they potentially get to move your meeple before you get to do that. How are you ever going to be able to achieve anything that you want? Then playing the game was a pleasant surprise because it turned out that the mechanics come together in a nice way and they feel pretty tight, they make sense after a while, and also they do allow you to have a degree of control. It is just that you have to work for it. The fact that you have to offer cards to other players during your turn may sound like a bummer. Of course, it means that actually you have a lot of opportunities to do stuff during other players' turns. Sometimes you do more stuff during other players' turns than during your own. The fact that the active player always has to offer an exchange means that you are always potentially involved. You will always have cards in your hand, and there's always a chance that you will be able to do that, to accept that deal. Maybe you don't, but at least you were interested because you wanted to see if that was a possible deal. As for matters of control, well, you have to start reading the other players rather than just looking at the cards and maximizing the odds of getting certain cards. You have to try to figure out what it is that they're trying to achieve. And maybe there's a certain card that you're playing in front of you and you really want to play for yourself. Then you have to figure out if the card is one that is not attractive to other players. Maybe 2 cards with the same arrows have different icons, and if you figured out the icons that other players are after, you get better chances of of them not picking up and taking the card from you. The same thing for movement. Yes, that the people move you, but when it is your turn, by placing a card there, you're also placing some limitations to the movement that are executed. For example, I see that a character is trying to do something, and then I try to play a card that I know that will not be attractive. Or other ways, I play a card that I know that if even then the other player receives it and uses as that movement, say, quote unquote, against me, that doesn't damage me. Even more subtle, I may figure out ways in which I look like I don't want to be moved in a certain position. They do move me in a certain position, and that gives me an advantage. So actually there is a component of bluffing, I wouldn't say lying, but of letting people believe things that are not true, that I absolutely did not expect as I read the rules or as I taught the rules to the people I played it with. At the beginning, some of the rules felt pretty abstract. You always have to exchange and you move other people's pieces. There are some concepts that are not all that common, but I'm glad that those concepts have been introduced here because they do work together well. The art is pleasant, gameplay really flows well because you really feel involved all the time. This is a huge advantage. There are other games that do this, and for example, I recently played Abyss that does that. But this one does too, and does it on a smaller scale, on a very manageable scale. The game is fairly light, and I'm talking about the box, although the box is pretty sturdy and nice, has a magnetic lock here, nice. Component-wise, production-wise, quality is pretty high. Gameplay is good, gameplay I enjoyed, so this is a game that I will carry around, I believe, in the next game events, because it's a game that I see that I can be able to put out as a warm-up with a group of, say, serious players, or just as a little more of a warm-up, a little more of a filler with players that like light games. It is light, but there are meaningful decisions to be made. There are exciting moments, there is bluffing, and there is psychology. All good things. It's a pretty small box, but game-wise, this is a game that has quite a bit to it. It packs quite a punch in a small package, in a small set of rules. Robin by Flatline Games will be released in Essen soon. I was able to play it in advance, and I was just, generally speaking, happy to play it, because Robin to me is a nice little game. Pretty fun.